Everyone, and welcome to the Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review stock markets and discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let us get started. Wall Street and global financial markets extended losses after the Trump administration escalated trade war, raising fears of economic slowdown, job losses, and resurgent inflation. Indexes on Wall Street declined for the sixth week in a row after the alternative measure of inflation confirmed stubborn inflation. Personal Consumption Expenditure Price Index, an alternative measure of inflation, held steady at 2.5% in February, confirming the difficulties of lowering inflation below the Fed's target rate of 2%. Core rate of inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, accelerated 2.8%, largely driven by elevated inflation in the service sector. The U.S. revised its GDP growth estimate for the fourth quarter at 2.4% from the preliminary estimate of 2.3%. The growth rate was revised higher because a trade deficit estimate was narrowed from the previous estimate. The U.S. goods trade balance in February narrowed 5% to $148 billion from $155.6 billion in the previous month when businesses front-loaded goods ahead of the launch of the tariffs. The goods deficit remains near a record high, and economists are lowering first-quarter economic growth estimate to 1.5% after businesses front-loaded in January. Passenger vehicle registration, a measure of automobile sales in the European Union, declined at the faster pace in February. The EU vehicle sales in February declined 3.4% to 853,000, following a 2.6% fall in the previous month. Sales in Italy declined 6%, followed by a 4.6% fall in Germany and a 3.3% decline in France. However, sales in Spain surged more than 8%. In the first 2 months to February 2025, battery electric vehicles accounted for 15% of the total EU market share, higher than 11.5% in the comparable period of 2024. Hybrid electric vehicles surged, capturing 35% of the market and remaining the preferred choice among European Union consumers. Consumer prices in the UK eased to 2.8% in February from 3% in the previous month after apparel and footwear prices eased. However, inflation is expected to rebound in the months ahead amid elevated service inflation and housing costs. United Kingdom's retail sales rose at an annual pace of 2.2% and advanced for the third consecutive month after falling in November. Separate report indicated that the UK economy had expanded at 1.5% from a year ago in the fourth quarter. The Norges Bank in Norway held its policy rate at 4.5% for the 10th consecutive meeting in March, citing elevated inflation and the need to keep rates restrictive. Norway's annual inflation accelerated to 3.6% in February from 2.3% in January, and the central bank reiterated its outlook to lower rates to 4% by the year's end. In other economic news around the world, France's inflation held steady at 0.8% for the second month in a row in February, and Spain's producer price inflation accelerated in February and extended gains to the fourth consecutive month. Tokyo area CPI, which is generally a precursor to the nationwide inflation, accelerated to 2.4% from 2.2% in February, and the index does not include fresh food prices. The index advanced about 2% for the fifth month in a row, largely because of an 89% jump in price of rice, the highest since record-keeping began in 1971. Tokyo area inflation is considered a leading indicator of nationwide inflation, and the index is scheduled to be released on April 18th. Let us review key events in global bonds, currency, and commodity markets last week. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury fell below 4.3% amid growing unease about the rising risks of a recession amid trade war escalation launched by the White House. Texas crude oil prices rebounded 2% to $69 a barrel amid worries of tighter supply conditions after the U.S. threatened 25% tariff on countries purchasing oil from Venezuela. Natural gas prices in Europe eased 7% below €41 per megawatt hour as the heating season nears its end and milder weather is forecast to the weeks ahead. The euro hovered near $1.08 after the weaker-than-expected data in France and Spain fueled expectations of another rate hike by the European Central Bank. The yen hovered at 150 against the dollar after strong inflation data in the Tokyo area and a hawkish signal from the central bank reinforced expectations of higher interest rates at the end of the next meeting. Let us shift our attention to major stock markets in the US, Europe, and Asia. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq Composite extended losses for the sixth consecutive week amid growing anxieties about Trump's tariffs, turmoil, adding to the businesses and economic uncertainties and the decelerating U.S. economic growth. European market struggles to advance after the U.S. imposed a 25% import tax on vehicles and automobile parts not made in the country. The Nikkei 225 stock average halted a two-week rebound after the U.S. imposed tariffs on vehicles imported from Japan, targeting the key engine of the economic growth of the country. Hong Kong and China indices struggled to advance amid looming U.S. tariffs, lack of catalyst, and soft economic data. Indian market indices rebounded after foreign institutional investors turned net buyers of stocks ahead of the earnings season. Let us shift our attention to merger deals, market movers, and earnings update from leading companies last week. James Hardie Industries, the global fiber cement maker, said it agreed to acquire the U.S.-based building products maker AZEK company for about $9 billion. Dollar Tree agreed to sell its Family Dollar business at a steep loss for $1 billion to private equity investors after about a decade of disastrous merge integration efforts to the acquired entity. Nike raised its quarterly dividend despite lower sales and earnings in the fiscal third quarter of 2025, but also cited challenging market conditions. FedEx lowered its annual outlook for the second time, and the parcel delivery company plans to spin off its freight segment. Micron Technology said revenue and earnings rose sharply in the latest quarter, and the memory and storage solution provider guided for higher revenue in the current quarter. H&M's profits slumped in the first quarter amid challenging market conditions, and the apparel retailer cited challenging environment in the weeks ahead, or rather months ahead. Next plc reported strong 2024 results, and the UK-based apparel retailer revised higher its sales guidance for the first half of 2025. Porsche Automobiles said 2024 sales fell following the decline in unit sales, and the company plans to diversify into defense sector. Kingfisher, the building products and home improvement products retailer, reported a 36% decrease in pre-tax earnings and a weaker-than-expected annual outlook, despite the company announcing a new £300 million stock repurchase plan. Vivendi, the French media company, said it lowered its stake in Telecom Italia to 18.4%. BYD Electronic, the Chinese electronic company, reported higher revenue and profit in 2024 amid rising demand from electric vehicle makers. In the week ahead, in the U.S., investors are looking towards the release of the surveys on manufacturing activities and service activities and monthly construction spending. On Thursday, investors are also looking at the international trade balance data, and non-farm payrolls are expected on Friday. On the earnings front, investors are expecting results from TechTarget, UniFirst, and Guess Incorporated. In Europe, market awaits Germany's retail sales data and preliminary inflation rate, UK's mortgage lending, housing prices, and global construction surveys, and Italy's inflation rate and manufacturing surveys are also on the schedule. France and Germany will also release final manufacturing survey data. The euro area is expected to report inflation and unemployment rates, consumer inflation data, ECB consumer inflation expectations data, producer price data, and construction PMI. Italy and the UK will also report annual new car registrations. On the economic front, investors are awaiting the results from YouGov, ABO Energy, Philip Morris, and Volvo Car. In Asia, investors are looking ahead to Japan's industrial production, retail sales, and unemployment rates data, and China's official manufacturing survey is also on schedule. Jibun Bank's manufacturing survey and China's manufacturing surveys are also scheduled this week. Japan's foreign bond investment and stock investment by foreigners will be released on Thursday, and household spending and monthly foreign exchange reserves are scheduled on Friday. India expects to release its foreign exchange reserves data on Friday. On the earnings front, investors are expecting results in Asia from China Overseas Land and Investment, Bank of Guizhou, Shanghai International Port, and Yutong Bus Company. You can review daily U.S. and global financial market news, stock movers, earnings releases, SEC filings, and economic updates on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can find the latest financial books on Rodera.com, keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com, review ETF and mutual fund performance and in-depth profiles on tickerfunds.com, and review market updates and stock movers in India on niveshak.in. That's all for today.